Imagine this, a grand dinner, crystal chandeliers, the richest guests in the city. At the head of the table, a powerful female billionaire CEO. Her words flow in Japanese, sharp and deliberate. But not a single guest understands her. Awkward silence, nervous laughter, tension thick in the air, and then, from the corner of the room, a black waitress, who no one even noticed, suddenly answers back, in flawless Japanese. The room freezes. The CEO's hand shakes. Her glass slips, because what the waitress says next changes everything. Stay with me. You need to hear this. The chandelier glowed faintly above the long mahogany table. Crystal glasses clinked, though no one dared to speak. Every guest turned to the woman at the head of the table. She was the billionaire CEO, wrapped in a silk gown the color of midnight. Her voice flowed with precision, each word sharp like a blade, but her language was foreign. Her words danced in Japanese, fast, deliberate, impossible to follow. Faces grew tense. A few guests laughed nervously, pretending to understand. Others stared at their plates, embarrassed by their silence. The billionaire smiled thinly, as though she enjoyed their confusion. The only sounds were the scrape of cutlery and the hush of shifting chairs. Then, from the corner of the room, a voice rose. It was the waitress. Her uniform was simple, her hair neatly tied back. Her tone was calm, yet commanding. She answered in flawless Japanese. The entire room froze. The CEO's eyes widened for the first time that evening. A flash of recognition flickered across her face. The waitress had not only understood, she had replied with a phrase that made the billionaire's hand tremble on the glass stem. The chandelier's glow seemed colder now. Every guest felt the air tighten. What had the waitress just revealed? And why did the CEO look as if she had seen a ghost? The CEO's glass tilted, a single drop of red wine slipping down the stem. Her hand clenched tighter, but she forced a smile that did not reach her eyes. The guests exchanged wary glances, each one sensing a secret none of them could name. The waitress remained still, her eyes steady, her Japanese words echoing faintly in memory. She had said something too precise, too personal, the kind of phrase that did not belong to chance. The CEO's throat tightened. Her gaze darted toward the waitress, as if searching for a sign of betrayal, but the waitress simply stood there, her shadow stretching long across the marble floor. A sudden draft swept through the dining hall, rattling the crystal chandelier. Candles flickered, their flames bending low, throwing distorted shapes against the walls. The billionaire's voice broke the silence. Her Japanese was smoother this time, yet edged with unease. Every guest leaned forward, breath caught, though they still understood nothing except the waitress. Her lips curved, just barely, into something between a smile and a warning. She answered again, but this time her words struck deeper. The billionaire's face drained of color. Her hand trembled so violently that the glass shattered against the floor. The silence after the shattering was unbearable. Every guest felt it. Something had just been exposed. Something dangerous. Something not meant for strangers' ears. The CEO rose from her chair. Her eyes no longer held command. They held fear. And the waitress? She finally stepped forward. Her shoes clicked softly against the marble, each step deliberate, each step closer. The echo of her footsteps filled the room. Each click rang louder than the last. Though her pace was unhurried, the guests sat frozen, their eyes shifting between the powerful billionaire and the woman who should have been invisible. The CEO gripped the edge of the table as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Her breath came shallow, uneven. The waitress stopped just short of the table. She lowered her gaze for a moment, respectful, then lifted it again with piercing calm. In flawless Japanese, she repeated a phrase that made the CEO stagger back. The sound of her chair scraping against the polished floor jolted the room. The words were unmistakable now, personal, intimate, impossible for a stranger to know. Gasps rippled across the guests, though none could understand the language. They understood only the billionaire's reaction. Her lips quivered, her eyes brimmed, with something far more vulnerable than anger. Fear. She raised her hand as if to speak, but no sound escaped. The waitress tilted her head slightly, studying her, waiting. The room felt colder. The shadows along the walls seemed to crawl closer. One guest whispered, breaking the tension, "What did she just say?" The waitress shifted her gaze toward the guests, her voice lowered. This time she spoke in English. The sentence was short, simple, and it made every fork drop onto the plates. The air seemed to thicken, pressing against every chest in the room. The billionaire CEO did not move. Her eyes, usually sharp as steel, now trembled with recognition. The waitress drew a slow breath, her calm unbroken. Then she spoke. Her English was clear, steady, deliberate. "You should not have left her behind." The words landed heavy, cutting through the silence like a blade. Chairs creaked as guests shifted uncomfortably, though none of them understood the meaning. The CEO's hand flew to her mouth. Her body swayed as though the ground itself had betrayed her. A murmur rose among the guests, confusion spilling across the table, but the waitress never looked away. Her eyes locked onto the billionaire's, unblinking, relentless. "You thought no one knew," she continued softly. Her tone was gentle, but each word struck with the weight of a secret buried too deep. The billionaire's knees weakened. For the first time in her life, she looked smaller than the room around her. The candles guttered, casting long, twitching shadows across the walls. Every guest could feel it now. This was no ordinary dinner. This was the unmasking of something that was never meant to surface. The billionaire whispered one word. "Almost too faint to hear?" "No." The waitress stepped closer, her voice lowering to a whisper only the CEO could hear. And whatever she said next made the billionaire collapse back into her chair, pale as marble. The billionaire's breath rattled, shallow and uneven. Her fingers gripped the armrests so tightly her knuckles turned white. The guests leaned forward, eyes wide, desperate to catch even a fragment of the whispered exchange. But they heard nothing. Only the soft hum of the chandelier above, swaying ever so slightly. The waitress straightened, her expression unreadable. The CEO stared at her, lips trembling, as if the words had ripped open a wound long buried. Then, in a voice that cracked the silence, the billionaire spoke. "Not here. Not now." The waitress's eyes narrowed. Her reply came in Japanese once again, sharp, precise, impossible for the others to understand. But the CEO understood. Her pupils shrank, her body recoiled as though struck by something invisible. The guests exchanged nervous glances. Someone coughed. Someone else whispered, "What is happening?" And then the CEO shouted, "Enough!" Her voice thundered across the hall, rattling the glasses, freezing every guest in place. The billionaire rose to her feet. Towering, yet shaking, her gaze swept across the room. Daring anyone to speak, no one did. The waitress, however, did not flinch. She took one final step forward, her shadow spilling over the billionaire's feet. Then she said, in English this time, with quiet certainty, "Everyone at this table deserves to know the truth." The words struck the room like a crack of thunder. Every guest stiffened in their seat. Forks rested mid-air. Glasses hovered, forgotten. The billionaire's eyes darted wildly, searching for control, searching for escape. But the waitress gave her none. Her steady gaze pinned the powerful woman in place. The billionaire's chest rose and fell too quickly, betraying panic she could no longer conceal. A bead of sweat slid down her temple. Still, she forced a smile. "A hollow, trembling mask. There is nothing to tell," she said, her voice brittle. The waitress tilted her head, almost pitying. Her reply came in Japanese again, quiet but merciless. The billionaire gasped, too loud, too sharp, and that sound told the guests more than words ever could. A restless murmur spread across the table. "What truth?" one man demanded. "Tell us!" another whispered. The billionaire lifted her hands as if to silence them, but her fingers quivered. The waitress turned to the guests at last, her voice lowered, steady, cutting through the heavy air. She was not born into power. She built it on a foundation of disappearance. Gasps rippled like a wave around the table. The CEO staggered back a step, her chair toppling behind her with a sharp crash. "No," she whispered. But the denial carried no weight. The waitress did not stop. She left someone behind, someone who trusted her. Someone who knew the truth before any of you ever did. The chandelier above swayed harder, as if the building itself trembled with the revelation. The guests sat frozen, all eyes fixed on the billionaire, and she looked as though the walls themselves were closing in. The billionaire's breath hitched, her frame trembling under the weight of every eye in the room. Her lips parted, but no words came. The silence stretched long, unbearable, like the pause before a storm. The waitress's eyes softened, though her tone remained unyielding. "She left her own blood behind," she said, her voice carrying across the table. The guests recoiled, some covering their mouths in shock. The CEO staggered, her strength unraveling, her mask of control shattered piece by piece, until only fear remained. No denial could erase the truth now. The waitress stepped back, her duty complete. Her final words, spoken in flawless Japanese, drifted like a haunting echo. "The past always finds its way to the table." With that, she turned and walked away, her footsteps fading into the shadows. The guests sat in stunned silence. The billionaire collapsed into her chair, her empire suddenly as fragile as glass, and in that vast dining hall, beneath the trembling chandelier, no one touched their food again.